You are live at the intersection because I, Michael Popok, are live at the intersection. I missed last week. I was on a cruise, a Disney cruise, not an ad, with my family. And I tried like the Dickens to find a Wi-Fi package that would work in the open sea, and it didn't work. And even though I drove the team crazy, trying to do a video here or there, I was just forced to have a good vacation and enjoy my family. And I appreciate all of you being here when I got back. And I am back. And so are you. Such amazing developments, gifts to the Democrats' independence, if you will. There's a story where we got to like pick ourselves up off the ground of the shock of an Iran war. We know what Donald Trump is doing. He's exporting chaos. He's bombing his way to what he thinks will be a successful midterm. It's a Nixonian, there we go. It's a Nixonian approach. When Nixon was flailing and failing with our last corrupt and criminal administration, somebody gave him the bright idea that he should start doing things globally and bombing and Cambodia and make peace with China. And, you know, very, very similar to the playbook we're seeing with Donald Trump, except it's even bigger and turbocharged, more lethal, more lethality. But it's not bamboozling the American people. It's not distracting them from his failures at home. His failures abroad, right, are not distracting him, pardon me, folks, from his failures at home. But there are real world consequences of what he's doing. I'm going to start off talking a little bit more about the Iran war. 160, mostly young girls between 7 and 12, died in a bombing. Donald Trump can't bring himself to admit it was a U.S. Tomahawk missile, apparently errant. So he's trying to blame the Iranians and everything else. But we know that in the fog of war, especially led by incompetence, bad things happen. Really bad things happen to innocent people, the people we are allegedly trying to liberate. My problem is not the notion of one day an American government taking a hard line with Iran and perhaps leading to regime change. I've been in favor of that for over 50 years. I was in let's see what year I was in. I was in ninth grade, when the Iranian hostage crisis happened. I get it. My problem is not that per se. My problem is not this administration, not these incompetents, not these depraved, immoral people who don't subscribe to the Colin Powell doctrine. If you break it, you bought it. Sorry, folks, I came home a little cold. And we just broke a 90 million person country. Venezuela is 1/10 the size, with no real plan in place, so erratic in the decision making. It's almost as if we had no plan for the aftermath. And that's why it's changing on an hourly, daily basis and freaking out our allies and freaking out the financial markets. And Donald Trump announcing, we won, everybody, mission accomplished, is not helping. It's just showing the depravity of where we are with this particular president. So no, I did not want this presidency to be the one to drop the bombs. As I've commented, it's easy to drop bombs, right? You can train a chimpanzee to push the right button. But the human toll, the human dimension, the 26-level chess game that has to be played politically, diplomatically, from a humanitarian standpoint, from an energy policy standpoint, from an economic standpoint, let's be frank, this group can barely cheat at checkers. They're not going to be able to accomplish this, and we're going to pay the price for it ultimately. I don't mean just at the pump, and yes, gas prices are skyrocketing because the price of a barrel of oil is skyrocketing, and I mean skyrocketing. $70 before February 28th, $120, $125 now. With our allies like Kuwait and the United Arab Emirates sticking it to us, cutting off the supply of oil at just the wrong time. Donald Trump announcing, well, we're opening up refineries. Refineries of what? You have to have the oil in order to refine them. It's almost as if Donald Trump doesn't understand the basics of the economy. And after 16 months in office, does anybody think that he comprehends the basics of economics? So let's start with the Iran war. And now they're trying to figure out politically how to play the death of 160 young girls. Here's Carolyn Leavitt, the press secretary, trying to take responsibility, but not really. Let's play the clip.
Regarding the missile strike on the Iranian school, how long does the administration expect that investigation to take, and will the White House or the Department of Defense release a full report of its findings once the investigation is complete?
The Department of War will do that. The investigation continues, and as the president said yesterday at his press conference, he will accept the conclusion of that investigation, whatever it may be.
Why did President Trump say yesterday that Iran may have Tomahawk missiles when there are only 3 other U.S. allies plus the U.S. that have those missiles and therefore could...
Look, again, as the president said yesterday, he will accept the conclusion of this investigation by the Department of War. I know there's been a lot of speculation in the media about who may be responsible for this. We're not going to get ahead of the Department of War and the conclusion of that investigation. The president has a right to share his opinions with the American public, but he has said he'll accept the conclusion of that investigation. And frankly, we're not going to be harassed by the New York Times, who's been putting out a lot of articles on this, making claims that have just not been verified by the Department of War, to quickly wrap up this investigation because the New York Times is calling on us to do so.
There's a tell, by the way. They're obviously being harassed by the New York Times, and they're speeding up their processes because of the public attention that independent journalists in the New York Times and Legal AF and Midas Touch are applying the pressure on them. She just gave you the tell, despite that she's already dressed for Easter, apparently. Seriously, I mean, we're at war. The fact that I just saw, I don't think we have it, but I just saw that the White House official account and the Department of Defense is showing this is with 160 girls dead, showing clips from the Iranian bombing mission interspersed with baseball and football, heroes from the past hitting home runs and throwing touchdowns. Yeah, that's all American while we're at war with another country and innocent people are dying. Show Mark McGwire hitting a home run. Again, I know I don't want to sound like a broken record, but we are watching the most depraved, immoral, unethical presidency, administration in history, bar none. And they know it. They know that things are failing. Look, let's just spend a minute or two on the economy, which I would have done even without the Iran war. But now let me put it into context. The February job numbers showed that Donald Trump's economy made 0 jobs, 0. In fact, it lost 90,000. Now, The Economist predicted that it was going to be a terrible jobs report, that only 60,000 jobs were going to be created as of the month of February. They were off by 150,000 because 90,000 were lost. That's before Donald Trump attacked the oil grid, the energy grid of the world. Because without energy literally fuels the global economy. You don't have oil, you don't have electricity, you don't have gross domestic product, you don't have economy. So what do you think, coming off the tariff debacle that crushed trade, combined with the joblessness? He hasn't created a job since he's been in office, if you total it all up, including the revisions to job reports. And now you add into it a global energy crisis of his own making. Because the Strait of Hormuz, which is 20% of all oil goes through the Strait of Hormuz in the Middle East, is effectively blockaded. Only the Iranians are getting through the Strait of Hormuz. Donald Trump makes all sorts of idle threats, and they're going to send in this troop and that troop and this battleship and that battleship. Okay, in the meantime, look at what a barrel of oil and therefore what you're paying at the pump. I predicted a couple of days ago Don't be surprised if it hits $7 a gallon. And I'm not just talking to our friends in California. Yeah. And Donald Trump comes out and says anyone that complains about gas prices is a fool. He just called his constituency and voters in general fools because he's accomplished nuclear disarmament. I thought we accomplished that in July. See, the other lie that's at the root of the Iranian war is that they were going to shoot first. You heard that one? And when you ask, what is that based on? You get people like Carolyn Levitt said, oh, Trump's intuition, his gut feeling, based on information he got from the negotiators. What negotiators? Are you talking about his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and his golfing buddy, Steve Witkoff? They believe, based on their zero experience as diplomats, as military strategists, I don't even think Jared Kushner was in the Boy Scouts. Based on their perception, he has a gut feeling that Iran, who we just bombed in July, was going to shoot first against the United States. Put in comments. All right, I'm getting live questions tonight. Put in comments if you believe that story. No. This is a Israeli-driven foreign policy. And people know I support generally Israel, just not Netanyahu. However, I don't want Israel driving my foreign policy as an American and making decisions along with two real estate developers about what happens in the Middle East and globally. And we're gonna pay the price, not just now in oil prices and the impact on the economy, although that's got to be terrible. You thought affordability was bad before? Wait till the next 6 months leading into the midterms. Think about the next generation of terrorists that we've just created in Iran, the way we're handling it. How did it go in Afghanistan? See Osama bin Laden. So we won't know for a generation, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, what new crop of terrorists, what new Osama bin Laden we have created or Trump has created for us, because he'll be long gone and probably dead by then. And we and our children and grandchildren will be paying that price, the way the Russians and the Americans primarily did after Afghanistan. Let me demonstrate that we are live by going to some questions. Let's see. That's interesting. E pluribus unum asked, is anybody monitoring the environmental destruction going down with our bombing? I'm sure not. I mean, the Trump administration is letting very few organizations into Iran right now. Andrew Rudick, 88, says, are any of the numbers to be trusted after the changes to the federal agencies responsible for tracking these monthly figures? That's a very good point. I mean, the fact that the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which Donald Trump gutted and replaced with one of his own, although the guy's still an economist, is showing the numbers that show his economy is terrible. I get your point. Maybe it's even worse, and history will be our judge. I think we feel in our bones that it's worse, as bad as these numbers are. And if you plug all of even these bad, probably cooked numbers, if you plug them into any model about what it means for the midterms, you come up with, remember, you need 218 seats in the Congress and the House to lead. 218, 435 up for grabs at the midterms, right? We do a royal flush, and all 435 members of Congress run for their lives and run for election at the same time. You have to come out at the end of that having at least 218. Every model I've seen says that right now, Democrats looking at 235, 240, maybe 250 because of the economy, the job picture, the inflation number, consumer confidence, right direction, wrong direction polling, favorable, unfavorable for the president polling. You throw all that in and you run that 1,000 times, 10,000 times, Stratomatic style, and the Democrats take the House, not by a little, by a lot. Senate, I think there's so much pent-up demand of voting to vote, and every time Donald Trump tries to F with our voting, I think it just pisses more people off and motivates them to vote and to register. We could take the Senate. The Republicans are so worried. They've been down here near me. I'm in Miami these days. They've been down here in Doral, Florida, home of the Big Blue Monster Trump resort meeting, Republican strategist meeting. And the messaging coming out of the White House, we got to stop talking about mass deportation. It's killing us. Or as Mike Johnson put it, we have a hiccup with the Latin vote. That's how they put it. We have a hiccup. Yeah, I think when you chase Black and brown people and a lot of Hispanics through parking lots and churches and hospitals, Home Depot parking lots and schools, preschools, and maybe even shoot them in the streets, you might have a hiccup with the Latin vote. But if this is how they think, just talk about crime, they say. Stop talking about mass deportation. We're done with the mass deportation. There were a lot of hiccups, like the death of Alex Preddy and the death of Renee Good and other Americans who died exercising their First Amendment rights, and other people that are in jail having exercised their First Amendment rights. Yeah, that's what we call it. Hiccups. Yeah. The fact that they so minimize and so patronize us, just shows you a party that's completely out of touch with electoral reality, which is why we're watching Political Suicide by Donald Trump. He doesn't care anymore. He's a short-termer, not short enough. He's a short-timer, short tracker. He's just trying to do maximum damage, make as much money as possible, and then hi-ho silver, off to Mar-a-Lago. And we have to clean up behind that elephant. Somebody asked, Bonnie Joe Slater asked you, Popok, do you anticipate the reinstatement of the draft? Speaking of political suicide, there's just not political will. There's not American support for this war effort, for the draft to be something that people would patriotically accept. And I think they know that. And if you think the poll numbers are bad now for the party, the Republican Party, wait till they try to call up 18-year-olds for a war that is 75% rejected by the American people. Honestly, the American people don't understand why we are at war with Venezuela and grab their oil fields. They don't understand why we are at war with Iran, having been told in July that all we got to do is bomb their nuclear program and we're done. They don't understand why we are threatening to go to war with Cuba, other than the fact that it is the ancestral home of Marco Rubio, and he has been dying to use our blood and treasure to, reclaim the beaches of Cuba. I know the hotel developers are. I know the Trump developers are waiting to build a hotel in Cuba, but I don't think that's a reason we should be spending hundreds of billions of taxpayer dollars. It'll be $1 trillion before it's all over on these attempts for Donald Trump to bomb his way to popularity, which we all know is not even possible. I do love the questions, though, so keep them coming. You're here on The Intersection. I ride solo on Tuesday nights on the Midas Touch Network. What a great place to be. If even though we look around ourselves, and I had a lot of people, I did a Substack Live today for Legal AF. I do that a couple times a day. And a lot of people say, Popok, there's just so much bad news. There's so much to keep up with. And but there is comfort in being together and joining together and having a dignified conversation with each other, right? We got to speak truth to each other first. And we're doing that. We do it here on The Intersection. We do it on the Midas Touch Network. We do it on Legal AF. And we're in growth mode, right? Because we have to be to meet the moment. There's just no, listen, I would do this if it meant riding around in an old van with a shortwave radio. But if we're going to meet the moment, we got to get big. We're up against billionaires and soon to be trillionaires who have captured corporate media. And what do we have? You, the fervent support of our audience and the growth related to it. And so now's our time too. When we all talk internally, it's like, we weren't kidding when we said 2026, we've got to grow to meet the moment. And intersection, of course, is part of that. Let me talk, before I take a break, let me talk about troops in polling places and voting. Because I tell anybody that I interview, I just interviewed today Attorney General Phil Weiser of the great state of Colorado. It'll be up tomorrow. Fascinating interview about the use of antitrust law by states in federal and state court to do the job that the Department of Justice no longer does, to protect consumers, to hold down prices, to ensure that there's competition in our marketplace. And you're going to want to see that interview tomorrow. Phil Weiser tomorrow on Legal AF YouTube channel. But I told him the number one concern of our audience is voting, and that their vote is protected. And we don't want to wait around at the midterms to find out what's going to happen. So today, the Democratic National Committee filed a new lawsuit in federal court in D.C., in which and it started with what's called the Freedom of Information Act request, which is how a lot of these key cases start, by the way. They start with a Freedom of Information Act request. For example, the case where finally Carrie Lake was declared to be illegally appointed. We knew that. Not properly Senate confirmed, and therefore all of her actions to destroy the voice of America and all of its constituent parts illegal. That started as a FOIA request by Democracy Forward, our friends on Legal AF and Sky Perryman. Freedom of Information Act means you can ask for, give us all the docs that went into this policy, or are you considering this policy or this change? And then from there, you can then file a substantive lawsuit. So the Democratic National Committee, apparently back in October, served the Department of Defense. I won't call it the Department of War. Department of Defense, the Department of Justice, and Homeland Security with 11 FOIAs requests, all basically the same. Are you planning to put the military in violation of federal criminal law at polling places? Are you planning to do that? Are you planning to have ICE or Homeland Security or Border Patrol or federal security officers or the National Guard or the Army? Tell us. And they rejected it. They didn't respond. So they filed a suit. Now, not only do they get attorney's fees, but they get the responses ordered by the federal judge. Now, with that information, now in March, we can prepare to file the injunctions against that happening, so we're not surprised in November. And that's one thing that the Democratic National Committee, the Democratic Attorneys General, they're doing now. This is the tabletop exercises they're thinking about, the worst case scenario, right? The doomsday scenario for them is something they think about how what is the worst thing Donald Trump could do? Start shooting voters in line? I mean, I don't know. I don't in good faith fear that, but I do fear if he has a military flyover at the moment of voting in Philadelphia or somewhere else, and what it could do to voters. My gut is voters are so resilient right now and so pissed off and upset and disgusted by the Trump administration that they'll go through barbed wire to vote. That's my sense. And I'm out in the public a lot, and I talk to a lot of people. I really believe that. Let me know what you think about that in comments tonight, and I'll be able to answer those questions. So that case got up off the ground in federal court in D.C., and I'll continue to follow that. And then one more voting story. Pardon me. United States Supreme Court, right? We are now in March. This is the way the Supreme Court works. First Monday in October, they start hearing cases and they open up their term. There's a fall term and a spring term. It's like college. The oral arguments that happen in the October, November period, you start getting those decisions sometimes in February, but very rarely. major decisions don't usually come out until March, April, May, and June. Usually later, like more like May and June. So we've been waiting on the voting decision about the Voting Rights Act and whether the MAGA in the Deep South are going to be able to redraw maps in time for this midterm to pick up 20 seats. That was Donald Trump's wet dream. The oral argument on the voting rights case, in which we think the Supreme Court is going to rule and cut back the Voting Rights Act even more than it already is, and maybe declare a portion of it in violation of the 14th Amendment, which will allow for redrawing of maps to eliminate black and brown representation, primarily black, in the Deep South, as long as it's in the name of politics. Well, we're just getting rid of Democrats, Judge. They happen to be black, but it's black, it's red and blue, Judge, not black and brown. If they do that, if they did that in time, it could have affected this midterm. But the oral argument was in October. Some states like Louisiana were so excited by the oral argument in October that they actually called the special session of their legislature in Louisiana for the end of October to redraw the maps. Boy, were they disappointed when it didn't come right out. It could have. We've seen quick decisions by the Supreme Court about voting. They made a decision, I think, in a week when it came to Bush versus Gore and the presidency. But we're in March, and there's no decision. And primaries have already happened. Remember, we reported on Texas and North Carolina. There's another one coming up today. There's ballots going out and mail-in ballots going out. We're too late. So, a couple of thoughts here. Maybe bashing the United States Supreme Court justices and attacking the ones you needed, like Amy Coney Barrett and Gorsuch, and saying that they were embarrassments to their family before the State of the Union address because they voted against your tariffs. Maybe that wasn't such a smart strategy, because maybe that's making them rethink how power drunk you have become. And rather than give you even more by letting Deep South states redraw their maps again to benefit you at the midterms, maybe we'll just hold off on issuing the decision. I think there's a little of that going on. And tradition, which is major decisions come out later in the calendar, regardless of what the election calendar looks like. And I also think that this is not going to be a decision I'm going to like to report about, because it's not going to be pro-voting the way the Voting Rights Act should be. And the justices in the minority, like Ketanji Brown Jackson and Sotomayor and Kagan, are taking their sweet time, and they should, to write their dissents. And you can't release the opinion. It's a little dirty secret. It doesn't matter if the majority opinion has been written already and has been written for like 3 months. Until the dissents are done, that thing is not final. Unless there's a leak. Now, remember, 3 years ago, or in March, we got a leak of the Dobbs decision, which ultimately took away a woman's right to choose. Now, the actual decision didn't come out until June. But the leak, which still to this day, 3 years later, they have not solved the leak. Is that hard to believe? Like, I'm seriously, if it happened in my law firm, over a weekend, we'd figure it out. And that was leaked on purpose because they wanted to stop the process of having the justices solicit each other's opinions and lobby each other. They wanted to kind of freeze it, which it did. And the Dobbs decision that ultimately came out in June was about 95% the same if you redlined it, compared it, as what happened in March. But unless there's a leak, right? And even a leak's not going to help be the actual decision. You can't redo maps off a leak. Even the Republicans can't. So unless they're going to run primaries again, which they could, but I don't think there's political will for that, or spend other money like that, Trump is going to have picked up effectively no seats. because Texas got neutralized by California. So smart on Gavin Newsom in California. And Virginia is still working. There's a vote. I just had Attorney General Jay Jones of Virginia on talking about tariffs and voting in Virginia. And they have an April vote to redo their maps for this midterm. That could be plus 10 Democrat. And even the numbers are not an easy fit. Like, even when Texas created 5 new Republican seats, there's one theory that it's so pissed off other Texans, independents and Democrats, that seats that were safe Republican have become imperiled and may go Democrat because of the backlash against the unfair play of creating seats at the last minute and cutting out Democrats. So in other words, it destabilized some Republican seats. So maybe the net is only +2 or +3. And that's a little weird anomaly. It's not that easy to just say, we made 5 new seats, everybody. Because when an electorate is as ornery and pissed off as this one is against the president and its party, and all they see is hiccups, chasing human beings through the streets and maybe murdering them or maiming them. Oh, that's just a hiccup with the electorate. Bombing Iran with no political support or moral support by Americans and letting gas just float up to $7. Oh, that's just a hiccup. We just have to, it's just a vocabulary problem. We got to stop calling it mass deportation. We have to focus on other things. You're running out of things to focus on because every major issue that Trump campaigned on and bases his administration on has led to voters yelling and screaming and running away from him. Immigration, the economy, tariffs, healthcare, affordability, you name it. I haven't even talked about the measles outbreak. How long can the show go? But I am glad first of all, I'm glad I'm back, and I'm glad I had a show to come back to. Thank you to my team, to my staff, to my audience, to the people that are fervent supporters. We will get through this together. This will be in our rear view mirror. Remember when the election happened and we were all of us took us, listen, I put on a hot pot of bourbon, went for a long walk in the woods, talked to my Midas colleagues about what are we going to do here? What's going to be our point of view? What's going to be our voice? Because we got to lead, we felt. We did in this time. And, and we can't hang out in the wilderness that long, right? We can't capitulate. We got to lean forward, not back. That was our internal coaching to ourselves in November. And we said, wow, 2 years, so far away. It's not that far away anymore. You can count it on one hand and another finger or two on the other hand, the midterm elections, getting registered to vote even sooner than that. Primaries are starting, and Trump knows it, and he's getting more desperate. But we're not going to let him use other human beings as props to bomb his way out of his political problems at home. Not on our watch, I guess is the right way to say it. But I'm so glad you're all here with us. There's ways to support what we do on The Intersection. The Intersection is part of an ecosystem that I created along with Ben Meiselas a number of years ago. We call it Legal AF for short. We've got Legal AF, the YouTube channel. That's where you can hang out every day, get 12 videos at the intersection of law and politics. We've got amazing contributors from Alan Glassfeld, All Rise News, to Court Accountability Action, to the American Civil Liberties Union, Court of History with Sidney Blumenthal and Sean Wilentz, you name it, the Pragmatic Optimists, just an amazing group of people that I value, and I know you will too. Then we've got this other part of the ecosystem, all sort of working together, called Legal AF on Substack, which we curate in a different way with live reporting that I do twice a day. In a way, the immediacy, the velocity of the stories we can bring to you in real time there in a way I can't even do on YouTube. Writing, reporting, commentary. We're trying to put under one pane of glass all things law and politics so that you know where to go. And when there's a legal AF on the brand, you know what to expect. And then the intersection, which was me begging the brothers for years to give me my own gig. No, I'm kidding. It started as back in a year ago where there was just a need, and Ben has sort of taken it over now with live reporting, right? And we said, Popok, can you do a couple of lives? Like we did Popok Live. That's what we called it. And on breaking news. And then we morphed that into a podcast that we now call The Intersection. And supporting us is, you're doing great with us. YouTube, we're in the top 100, sometimes top 50 or 20 for top podcasts on all subjects on YouTube. And we've only been around 8 months, so we're really impressed and happy about that. And thank you for that. And then come over to the Apples and Spotifys of the world, plug in The Intersection, leave comments and 5-star reviews, and help us on the audio side. And then because of your fervent support and the audience that we've built, we have sponsors that want to speak to our audience, and we curate it along with the Midas Brothers and Jordy for you. And here is a word from our Intersection sponsors. If you're like me and you've searched for your name or address in Google, it is shocking to find how many results have your personal information. It's not by chance. Data brokers and people's search sites collect your personal information, your name, address, phone number, financial info, income, and hundreds of other records. They sell and share it publicly without your consent. But Incogni is here to put an end to that. You sign up, you give them permission to act on your behalf, and they go out and demand that data brokers delete your personal info. You don't have to email anyone, fill out forms, or jump through hoops. They handle the entire data removal process for you. It doesn't just do that and walk away. Incogni also continuously monitors if your data is put back onto these databases, requesting repeated removals, keeping your data yours forever. Incogni has also launched a new feature called Custom Data Removals, available in their unlimited plan. It allows you to send in any link from any site that exposes your data, and then Incogni's privacy professionals will go after it. No bots, no forms, just real people making your data disappear. Total legends. This is especially useful for removing records from places like legal databases or people's search engines that don't play nice with traditional opt-outs. Right now, you can get 60% off their annual plans by heading to incogni.com/truth and using the code TRUTH at checkout. It's also completely risk-free. Incogni offers a 30-day money-back guarantee if you're not satisfied with them removing your personal information off the internet. Live free from dangerous spam by using Incogni. That's incogni.com/truth for 60% off their annual plans. Starting something new can be pretty terrifying. When I started our YouTube channel and started producing more podcasts, I kept thinking, what if no one watches and listens? What if this doesn't work? But sometimes the best decisions come right after those biggest doubts. That's where Shopify comes in. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world and 10% of all e-commerce in the US, from household names to brands just getting started. If you're launching something of your own, Shopify makes it easy to build a beautiful online store with hundreds of ready-to-use templates that match your brand style. And Shopify lets you tackle everything in one place, from inventory to payments to analytics, making your business operations smoother. It's time to turn those what ifs into with Shopify today. Sign up for your $1 per month trial today at shopify.com/intersection. Go to shopify.com/intersection. That's shopify.com/intersection. Did you like that acting chops when I waited for the Shopify bell to come? Straight. That was like, and then bing. This is, I hung around with a lot of actors at NYU, and that skill is finally paying off. I'm glad you're back. Let me hit questions on Intersection Live. Here we go. Henry Rosenbush asks the Democrats, if the Democrats or when the Democrats get control of both houses or both chambers, how do they balance holding responsible the people we know need punishment and begin the arduous process of rebuilding the departments being gutted? All right. Well, look, I think from the executive branch standpoint, at the midterms, what they're going to be able to do with the House and hopefully the Senate is start proper investigation, oversight, and impeachment proceedings. I mean, how many articles of impeachment has Donald Trump rung up already in 16 months? I mean, it would be 3 articles of impeachment, 2 like the last time, forget it. We're talking about dozens and dozens of articles of impeachment, including about the Iran war. And he's not the only one that would be impeached. Lying to Congress is still a crime. And people like Pam Bondi and Tulsi Gabbard and Pete Hegseth and RFK Jr. And Kash Patel, and the list goes on, are all open. It's open season for them to be impeached, and they know it, especially the lawyers among them. I'll talk at the end of the intersection tonight about Trump lawyers already being subject to bar investigations about their licenses. So that process will happen. What you want to have happen, and I'm sure the Democrats can walk and chew gum or walk and impeach at the same time, is that they're also creating policies to address affordability and address and reverse all of the policies. See, Donald Trump is busy making law because Congress is his puppy dog, led by Mike Johnson, who sits on his lap. And so since they're not doing their job in creating law, Donald Trump is using executive orders to execute on law that hasn't been created, meaning he's making law. So as soon as Congress gets back in the business of being legislators, which they will under the Democrats, then we'll see lots of law that Trump will have to execute in order to help the American people. And if he doesn't, then the House can do something about it. They can go to court and force him to do it. So we want both those things to go on, right? We want accountability. We want to address corruption. We want to root out corruption. We want to pin down all of Donald Trump and make him the lamest of ducks, right? But we also have to do the business of the people. It is the people's house. So those two things will be quite shocking to people who are used to a know-nothing, do-nothing Congress. So that happens. Then in terms of the rebuild of the departments, there's only so much Congress can do in rebuilding. I mean, you can hold back funds. We're in the midst of doing that now. And like say, we're going to hold these funds unless you get rid of Kristi Noem, or we don't like what you're doing over here in this department. You have to reform it, or we're going to do a filibuster. Yes, and they're doing that successfully. That only goes so far. That doesn't make 7,000 competent people return to the Department of Justice because the leadership hasn't changed. Yeah. I mean, I think Pam Bondi doesn't survive much longer, especially the Epstein Oversight Committee hearing. I'll leave that for a moment. So think of it in 2 parts then, Henry. You've got midterms. Let's get back to checks and balances. Let's get back to oversight. Let's get back to impeachment. Let's get back to maybe conviction and removal. I don't know. I've said this. Give me the House. I feel like Patrick Henry. Give me the House and the Senate. I'll give you impeachment and convictions and removals. We can remove. I want to remind people, we can remove Donald Trump from office. It takes 2/3 votes, including in the Senate, but he can be removed. Then that'll springboard, trampoline into 2028, the election, a new executive in fill in the blank. You can put it in comments, fill in your favorite current candidate for the presidency, and with a D next to his name or her name. And then they can start the rebuild. Yeah, bringing the best and the brightest. It starts with who they put in leadership positions. Who's going to be the attorney general? Who's going to be the head of state? Who's going to be the head of the Department of Defense, Commerce, Treasury, Health and Human Services, all that. Once those people, and they're given the remit and the funding to go get the best and the brightest, they'll go out and people will return to government. Right now, they went out into the wilderness. It's like 40 days and 40 nights. They go to private law firms, they go to public interest groups. They don't come out and take that. They stay in federal clerkships with judges longer. Then they go to the U.S. Attorney's Office in 2029. It's a changing of the trajectory of people's careers for government. Because people, when I came out of law school, and it's not that much different now, if you wanted to be a federal prosecutor and eventually practice in private practice, you did the following. You went to a very good law school, you graduated, you went in, you took 1, 2, or 3 clerkships with federal judges, moving up the ranks, maybe a district court judge, then an appellate judge, and maybe the United States Supreme Court. Okay. Then with all of that judicial experience, judge experience, then you went off and worked at a law firm for a year or two. Then you went into the Department of Justice and you worked in one of their offices, either on the appellate side, the criminal side, the civil side, right? There was some fast track program, the honors program that got you into the Department of Justice faster. But that's traditional, right? So you graduate law school at 25, you spend until about 28 in clerkships, you spend a couple of years, then by like 30, you go and work for 5 years or so in the U.S. Attorney's Office. You come out at about 35, 36, and you go become a partner at a big law firm. That was the track. Now there's big gaps. It's like, I'll do that extra year of a clerkship. People are trying to figure out how to wallpaper over and bridge this 3 years, right? So it'll be like, well, I was going to come out now and go to the U.S. Attorney's Office, but I'll do another federal clerkship. Okay. I'll go spend an extra year in a law firm. I'll go do a pro bono program. I'll work in public interest. I'll work for a charity or something. And then I'll return in 2029 to the Department of Justice, now headed by a moral, ethical adult. And that's how, and then apply that to all the other departments and cabinet level positions. That's what's going to happen. And the people that are the best and the brightest, that would be amazing public servants or have been amazing public servants, will hopefully return. They may be a little bit older than usual. I think that's definitely an advantage. Instead of seeing a whole bunch of 28-year-olds and 30-year-olds in government, you'll see a lot of 35-year-olds in government. Like, oh, because we were biding our time. No pun intended, waiting for Trump to end. I think that's what's going to happen there. Let me turn to a new ruling that came out in the last 24 hours in New Jersey, but that has other implications. Federal Judge Brand, who sits in Pennsylvania, Chief Judge in Pennsylvania Federal Court, but got appointed to New Jersey. He's the judge that bounced Alina Habba out of the U.S. Attorney's Office in New Jersey. You remember, it was one of the first ones. He was one of the first decisions that no, Donald Trump can't illegally appoint U.S. attorneys, skip Senate confirmation, keep them in office as special attorneys under Pam Bondi, and everything will be fine. Are we okay now? No, it's not okay. You have to follow the federal the federal vacancy. Let me try it again. Cut. You have to follow the Federal Vacancy Reform Act. You have to follow the Constitution. And then, you get 120 days. And after that, the judges of the district pick the U.S. attorney until you get around to getting somebody through the confirmation process. How hard is this? But Donald Trump doesn't like to be told what to do. And he likes to have his unqualified people in these offices to go after his political critics. See Lindsay Halligan. And so she gets bounced. He gets appointed and assigned to the case because he's in Pennsylvania, which is part of the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, which sits over New Jersey. But he's not a New Jersey federal judge because they're the ones that are going to have to pick if there's a vacancy. So there was a conflict of interest. So they appointed Judge Brand. Make sense? Okay. So he writes a scathing, Alina Habba's got to go order. They appeal it to the Third Circuit Court of Appeals. The 3-judge panel says, including Republicans, say she's got to go. And she resigns. And we haven't heard from her since. Isn't that great? It's like she went right down the drain. Like Lindsay Halligan. So there's still 5 openings that Donald Trump's still effing around with not appointing. We're 16 months into his administration. And 5% of the districts don't have a U.S. attorney. So in New Jersey, he decided to try something else. He fired the lawyer who was picked to be the new prosecutor by the judges in like an hour. And then he just took 3 assistant U.S. attorneys, split the job up among them, 1 for criminal, 1 for civil, 1 for administrative, and then just said, oh, they've got the superpowers of U.S. attorney, one third, one third, one third, because Pam Bondi gave him that power without them being confirmed by the Senate. And Judge Brand, back again, appointed by the Third Circuit chief judge to handle this case too, said it is an abomination. He said particularly that Donald Trump is obviously, his administration is lawless, violating the Constitution, and there's ramifications for it. He said, here's the ramification. If you don't appoint a proper U.S. attorney, I'm going to start considering dismissing criminal indictments and opening the jails and letting people out for anybody who was convicted by the participation of these three people that are not U.S. attorneys. So fix your problem. So now we've got, this is what I love about federal judges in the second year. In the first year, they were like, what happened? Right? There was a lot of what happened. Second year, they've been talking to each other. It's like, oh, wait a minute. I remember now. I got a whole bunch of hammers in my tool bag as a federal judge. I can start using them. So you see all the judges around the country using various means and methods in a way they didn't in the first year against the Trump administration and Department of Justice. Not just nasty orders, but contempt. Number of contempt orders have come out already. Threats to put people in jail if things didn't happen, and then suddenly they happened. And here, I'm going to open up the jails and let all the criminals out unless you appoint a proper U.S. attorney. Very creative. I very much appreciate I've always appreciated federal judges. You should hug a federal judge near you. Just be careful because they all got bodyguards now, understandably. But they are doing Lord's work right now to defend our democracy. And I shout out to Judge Brand for doing that and making that threat. One last, and making good on that threat. So lastly, let's talk about how bar associations are dealing with wayward lawyers. That's a nice way. It's like a hiccup. A lawyer with a hiccup, like they're unethical or they're doing illegal things or they're violating their oath of office, hiccups in the Republican parlance. And so last week, we had the report that Lindsay Halligan, an investigation by the Florida bar, which I'm a member, had opened up an investigation. And then we got the paperwork that showed they opened up an investigation. And then the Florida bar freaked out because I'm sure they got pressure from Governor DeSantis. And suddenly did we say investigation? What we meant was we're aware of developments. We wouldn't, it suddenly became like, for those that are my vintage, it suddenly became like a Jackie Mason routine, the comedian. I wouldn't say investigation. That's a strong. We don't investigate. It's more like we're ruminating. It's more we've opened a rumination. Okay, they opened up an investigation. They already have a number for it. And the reason they can open up an investigation is because several federal judges in Virginia said that she did unethical things when she was an illegal prosecutor going after former FBI Director James Comey and Letitia James. I'm talking about Lindsay Halligan. Now, she eventually got shown the door and had to resign in disgrace, but not before Judge Novak said, why are you impersonating a U.S. attorney when you're not? Badge and all, and threatened to discipline her and send her for discipline. Now, she's a Florida bar member too. Now, Florida bar made up a rule. Literally, they made up a rule that I'd never heard of. I'm 35 years practicing, 32 in Florida. Never heard of this rule in my life. And I'm pretty astute about rules of ethics. That they're not going to open up a bar investigation about somebody's law license until they're out of the federal government. I'm like, where is that? Where is that? That totally turns upside down law practice. See, law practice is pursuant to a license. We call it being a member of the bar, right? And in order to be a practitioner and practice law in a state, you have to pass the bar of that state or be admitted into that state's bar. And therefore, you subject yourselves to the regulation of the bar regulators of that state. And it's different in a lot of states. It's either the Supreme Court regulates of your state or a appellate court of your state or there's what we call an integrated bar, like the Florida Bar, and they're a bar organization. Usually, people run to be on the Florida Bar. The governor appoints some people, and they regulate. But you get regulated. We're self-policing, and they can take away your right to practice. You can be censured. You can be fined. You can be sent off to remedial classes. All sorts of things to protect you, because an out of control, unethical, illegal lawyer is really dangerous in society, right? Especially if they're still taking clients. So you can't practice in federal court unless you have a state license. Doesn't have to be necessarily for the state the federal court is in, but you got to have an underlying state bar license, period. So in other words, you can't, and this is confusing to people, especially outside of our country that follow the show, you can't just come out of law school, pass a federal bar, and start practicing in federal court. There's no such thing. They're going to say, great, what state are you a bar member of? Oh, I'm not. I just came out of law school. I just want to take your exam and I can practice in federal court, right? No. They regulate also, but not like that. So I don't understand how a federal Department of Justice attorney or Pam Bondi, who has a law license, it's the only way she's a lawyer, how she cannot be sanctioned until she's out of office. Now, here's another little dirty secret. You don't have to be a lawyer to be a judge. You don't have to be a lawyer to be on the Supreme Court. You don't have to be a lawyer to be the Attorney General of the United States. Did you hear me? It's not a requirement. I'll give you time. Go look it up in the Constitution. It isn't there. And we have had situations. You don't even have to be a judge to be on the Supreme Court in the past. Alina Kagan was never a judge. Okay? And I love her as a Supreme Court justice. She was a Solicitor General, but she was never a judge. And you don't have to even be a lawyer. If Donald Trump tomorrow, sit down for this one. If Donald Trump tomorrow wanted to make RFK Jr., and he had an opening, a Supreme Court justice, assuming he could get confirmed, he could be on the Supreme. Oh no, he's a lawyer, by the way. I keep forgetting. That's the thing. He is. He is a lawyer. He's just not a scientist or a health professional. Let me use another. Stephen Miller. There's a great example. That's a better example. Stephen Miller, okay, who's barely human. He was hatched somewhere, slithered out from under some rock somewhere. He went to school. I know because we share an alma mater. I think he went to Duke undergraduate. I went to Duke for law. He did not go to law school, though. Is made a associate justice of the United States Supreme Court. It could happen. So I get that argument that you don't have to even be a lawyer or a judge to get any of these jobs. But if you are, your conduct is subject to discipline. I know lawyers that never practiced law, but took the bar. They graduated from law school. They took the bar. They went and worked in financial services. They worked at Goldman Sachs their whole life. And not even in law. They were investment bankers. Or they completely out of the field. They became accountants and never practiced law, but they did something fraudulent. They could lose their bar license, even though they're not operating as a lawyer. So they've opened up not only the investigation against Lindsay Halligan, but one of this one I love. Eagle Ed Martin has a DC bar investigation, disciplinary proceeding opened up against him. Who's Ed? There he is. Look at him. Ed Martin. I didn't recognize him without his trench coat, stalking Letitia James's neighborhood when he was the head of the weaponization group for the Department of Justice under Pam Bondi. Remember that? So here's what happened to Ed Martin. No prosecutor experience. MAGA, representing MAGA and Jan Sixers, okay? And with a social media, thinks he's a social media influencer. Friends with all the MAGA lawyers. He gets the gig of being the acting U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia, right? But he can't get confirmed. And he does crazy shit, which is the subject of the disciplinary charge, like threatening Georgetown University and its law school about eliminating DEI, or it's always extortion, or they'll never get their law students into the U.S. Attorney's office in D.C. ever again. And nobody liked that. And so they made a complaint about it. And but he was only the U.S. attorney interim for 3 months. He was so crazy that even his brand of crazy was too much for Donald Trump and the Senate Republicans. And so he got bounced. But to save face, they gave him 2 other jobs. The pardon attorney, all these crazy pardons Donald Trump's doing and restoring gun rights for crazy criminal people. Yeah, that's Ed Martin. And they gave him this, head of the weaponization committee. It's sort of like Kristi Noem becoming a Marvel character. She's now the head of S.H.I.E.L.D. I thought they were talking about a new Marvel movie. I said, we have a S.H.I.E.L.D. She's the head of it. That's a makeup job. What do they call that in the Sopranos and in the mob world? That's a no show, no work job. Yeah, that's what that is. So they give Ed Martin one of those, and he accomplishes nothing. Right? There's a long list of Donald Trump's hit list. Letitia James and James Comey, Brennan, the CIA director, Bolton, the national security advisor, Adam Schiff, the senator, and all Donald Trump really wants, as I've said time and time again, is the headline. Criminal probe opened up against, criminal investigation. Make them go through, have to suffer, pound of flesh, hire lawyers. That's what he wants. Whether they really get indicted, he doesn't care anymore. He's moved on, or has he? So, of that list I just gave you, only one got indicted in 15 months. John Bolton. That one I don't know. I don't know much about. I mean, I read what happened in the indictment, but the rest, Senator Schiff, Brennan, CIA, and the rest, no, none. So that was on Ed Martin's watch. Apparently, Trump was so pissed off at Ed Martin that they fired him 6 weeks ago and kicked him out of his office in the Department of Justice and put him in an office building in another neighborhood in Washington. That's how far away the guy has gone, right? And now he's up for disciplinary proceedings. And the D.C. bar, shout out to the D.C. bar. I had the president on with me earlier in Legal AF, earlier in the year in 2025. I'd like to get her back on. She defeated Pam Bondi's brother, who was trying to, but he lost. So the best that they can do is talk about faint praise for Ed Martin. Was Todd Blanche, the number 2 in the Department of Justice, sent out a social media post that said, "This is why I'm not a member of the D.C. bar. I never will be." That's all you got for the guy? That's it? That's it? And how bad could the bar be? Pam Bondi's brother ran for president. Now, they're smart because Bondi, as we talked about on Saturday with Ben, Bondi is circulating a new order that will give her office, the Department of Justice, the right to investigate first people like Ed Martin and hold off the state bars from doing their job, which nobody likes, right? The wolf regulating and investigating the chicken coop. Yeah, no, thank you. So I'm not sure that order ever sees the light of day, but for right now, if you are, I'm talking now to bar regulators and people that want to file complaints, legitimate, against people in the Trump administration. Now is the time to bring them. And I'll leave it at that. I'm glad you're here on The Intersection every Tuesday night, only on the Midas Touch Network. Such amazing things have happened in 2025 and 2026, and we are just getting started here on The Intersection, on Legal AF, the YouTube channel. Become a paid subscriber there if you can swing it. Become a regular member if you can swing it. 12 videos a day, amazing contributors and commentators. So you have under one pane of glass all things law and politics under the Legal AF brand. And of course, we've got the Legal AF Substack, where I do two lives a day, other commentary and contributions. Come be with us on Legal AF Substack. And then a shout out to our first sponsors here on The Intersection. So this will go up on audio. Pick us up on audio on Spotify and Apple. And of course, send this to your friends, invite them to the next showing, and keep us right where we are at the top of the charts for all podcasts. Again, I thank you for the welcome that I've received in my return from my holiday. I'm here with you. We're shoulder to shoulder. We're vibrating on the same frequency. Until my next Legal AF podcast tomorrow night, this is Michael Popok. Shout out to the Midas Mighty and the Legal AFers. Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.